Welcome to Digging for Kryptonite, a Supergirl fan journey. I'm your host, Anthony Desiato. Joining me to discuss Many Happy Returns by Peter David and Ed Benes is the host of the Men of Steel podcast, returning guest, Case Aiken. Welcome back.
Anthony, thank you so much for having me back. I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so happy to discuss the happy returns of a series that I really enjoyed, but was the swan song for it.
Alas, it was the swan song of this Peter David written series that ran from 96 to 2003 for 80 issues, and Many Happy Returns spanned issues 75 through 80. And notably, if people know nothing else about this arc, it's probably this. It featured the return, temporarily at that point, of the pre-crisis Kara Zor-El, and showed us the Linda Danvers Supergirl attempt to take Kara's place and make the sacrifice in her place in the multiverse. And of course, we'll talk about how all of that played out. But I'm really excited to have you here. People might notice that our coverage of the Peter David series is a little bit lopsided. We did one episode on the first 50 issues, that mega arc that comprised the Earthborn Angel storyline. And then we did a subsequent episode on issues 51 through 74, sort of the sequel to that Earthborn Angel arc, as the depowered Linda Danvers and the Demon Buzz were searching for the Matrix entity and all of that. And now here we are covering the last 6 issues in its own dedicated episode. But I felt that this storyline warranted it for the reasons that we've already hit at and that we will continue to talk about. So I'm really excited for this. And let me toss it to you first, because I know when you kicked off your trade school podcast series, you began with Many Happy Returns, and you talked specifically about how important it was to you personally with respect to your comic book reading and collecting at a really pivotal time. Would you mind sharing about that?
Yeah. So I went to school in upstate New York at a campus that at the time didn't have a comic book store. Like, even at the bookstore, it had like a couple trade paperbacks every now and then, but didn't really have much in the way of comics. So I had fallen off of like most of my regular pull, like my weekly box, I had to do away with because I was away. And so I had been reading Supergirl through the Demon arc. I had read a good chunk of the post or not the Demon, the Angel arc and the post Angel arc. But it had become much more sporadic. And then I was home and I just happened to pick up the first issue of this arc. And I was like, oh, this is, and mostly because I saw 2 Supergirls on the cover. And I was like, oh, that's fascinating. And was immediately hooked. The Ed Benes artwork I adored. It's a little cheesecake in retrospect, but I was also 20 at the time, and so it worked just fine for me. But I really adored it, and I picked up all the issues of it, and was really sad that this book that I had read a lot of and I'd been a big fan of in general had slipped away. Then when the trade paperback came out, I made sure to grab it. And one of the reasons that it resonated with me, beyond just the fact that I thought that it was a fun story with good art and a good send-off for a character that I really enjoyed, was that it tickles a particular kind of itch for me in terms of my fandom, which is the sort of historical lens that was really pervasive in the 90s. The 80s, 90s was a period where people were starting to like come up with things like the terms the Golden Age, the Silver Age for comics. We saw books like Astro City that were these big meta narratives that are about comics as much as they were about the actual stories in play. And there's an element of that here where it's a dissection of the Kara Zor-El story that when you look at it from the lens of an adult, it's patently insane. It's like, oh, it was a city that was floating with an air bubble, and she had a super telescope, and all these details, and the story goes out of its way to sort of like poke fun at those elements, but to also do so lovingly. And I really resonated with those kind of details. And there was also this detail, which was that Kara Zor-El had been dead my entire lifetime at that point. She died in Crisis, and I was 2 when that happened. So I had never seen her as an extant character, but I owned, and the only issue I owned at the time of Crisis on Infinite Earths was her death. And that issue that I had just picked up in a 50-cent bin in Bethany Beach, Delaware, was just, oh, this was this triumphant sacrifice of a character. And so I got to see very much like the end of this character. And then this was such a loving take on her beginnings. Like you get to play through her origin with a modern lens, with updated art and with all these kind of details. It just really it really hit me at the right moment, and was part of the reason that I made a very concerted effort as I was ending my college career to commit myself to comic books in a way that I had sort of let go fallow just by virtue of it being not around me, and social pressures at the time, because I wanted to be cool and comic books weren't cool, and all that. But this is one of those stories that stood out to me and was like, oh man, this is why I love this stuff. This is why I'm here.
Beautiful. I mean, so much of what you said resonates with me. I, as I've talked about, had not been reading this Peter David series as it was coming out. I had read only the first few issues, essentially the Gary Frank drawn issues way back at the beginning of the series, and I fell off. But I do remember when Many Happy Returns was coming out, and there was a lot of buzz, and I remember sales were picking up. It had heat. I'm sure there were articles in Wizard magazine that I read, and I remember it being a thing and seeing it on the shelf, yet unfortunately not being moved enough to pick it up, although I did buy that trade paperback collection when it came out and loved the story then, and get even more out of it now as I return to it after having spent so much time with Supergirl generally and this Supergirl series in particular. So it's an absolute standout, and you use the word lovingly a number of times as you were describing it. And I think that's at the heart of this for me. And this was something that I wouldn't have really been picking up on as much back in the day, where, yes, you do get this really often humorous send-up of Silver Age sensibilities and characterization. There's a line where Linda's talking about how absurd it would be to bring this newcomer, this alien to the planet, to an orphanage. And instead she brings her home, right? Something that we've been joking about in so many of these episodes when you look back at the original Kara Zor-El debut in the Silver Age. Yet I never felt like they were putting down the character. And that went a long way. There was a warmth to those moments and those jokes. And that really, really went a long way for me. And I feel like if there's one moment that really encapsulates it, it's in, I believe, the second issue of the arc, where Kara Zor-El is doing a handstand.
Yes, I was going to say that's the ultimate moment.
It's the moment where she's doing this handstand and Linda's asking her what this is all about. And Kara explains she's heard with her super hearing a broadcast about this comet that's on its way to Earth, is going to crash into Earth. And she is pushing on the Earth to move the planet out of the way of the impending comet. And Linda's like, whoa, okay, first of all, the Justice League is already on it. Second, you can't do that. That's not a thing. And third, if you did, the environmental consequences would be catastrophic. So it's this very funny moment. And poor Kara is like, but I've seen Superman do this so many times. And while I didn't look up specific instances in the Silver Age, I'm sure they exist. And we have instances of Superman moving planets and all of that.
I couldn't think off the top of my head of a scene in a comic, but I could think of in like Super Friends and like the cartoons of the day, that those representations all the time. Like I've seen Superman do it in animation. So that the second I saw that scene, I cracked up because it's such a trope.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but I just felt like that was a perfect encapsulation of what we're talking about, of having some fun with those classic Silver Age stories. But like I said, never at the expense, I felt, of Kara Zor-El herself. I felt like it was more poking fun at the story sensibilities of the day. And I really, really enjoyed that. So yeah, the warmth and loving nature of moments like that really, really stood out to me. Now, I guess as interesting as the story itself is the context and the publishing history of all of this. So like we're saying here, this marked a departure for the series in a number of ways. We were now past all of the Earthborn Angel business. and felt like very much a concerted effort to make the book more accessible and increase sales. And certainly bringing on a new artist like Ed Benes, I think, speaks to that. And this was an relatively early in his career, Ed Benes. This was before he was even on Birds of Prey, right?
Yeah, this is the first time I saw him.
Yeah, absolutely. And as far as where we pick up here, and obviously people have heard our discussion of the second major chunk of the Peter David series, but we had this long arc where Linda had been separated from the Matrix entity, but was searching for her alongside the depowered demon Buzz. And eventually they did reunite, but rather than merge once again to once more become the Earthborn Angel of Fire, instead Matrix merged with another character, Twilight, and then they were able to restore Linda and bring her back up to full power because her powers had been scaled down significantly after issue 50. So
right after issue 50, she's basically like the pre-Christ or the golden age, eighth of a mile leaping Superman at that point.
Yes, in her Superman the Animated Series costume, which she retains here for the last bit of the series. So as we pick up Many Happy Returns, we have a Supergirl who is fully Linda Danvers and is fully powered and is still in her Superman the Animated Series look. And she's returning to Leesburg and events will unfold. But as far as the wider publishing context, and I was looking up the dates of all of this to see kind of how all of this broke down here. So these issues released from October 2002 through March 2003. The other Supergirl character, CIR-EL, the supposed daughter of Superman, who turns out to be not quite that, from the Stephen T. Siegel Superman run. We'll talk more about her, but she made her debut in January 2003 in Superman the 10-Cent Adventure. So while Many Happy Returns is going on, we have the debut of the CIR-EL Supergirl over in the Superman title.
Oh, I didn't realize there was that overlap.
Yeah, that's why I really wanted to make sure I grabbed these dates because I was curious. I knew they were close in time. I didn't realize they more than close, that they overlapped. So we had a new iteration of Supergirl pop up while this arc was going on. And then ultimately we would get the Superman, Batman, Supergirl arc by Jeff Loeb and Michael Turner in March 2004. So essentially a year after Many Happy Returns ends, we get the official permanent reintroduction of Kara Zor-El in the pages of Superman Batman. So it's a very interesting time where it felt like, yeah, you could have seen this go in a different direction. And obviously, like we said at the top, this ended up being the final arc and Peter David didn't get to kind of play this out the way he had intended. But it was just kind of interesting to see where all of this fell into place.
When I did my trade school episode, trade school for listeners at home that we referenced is a series that I run that Anthony has been a guest on, where each episode a guest raves about a comic book that they love for 5 to 15 minutes by themselves. And for the pilot, I did Many Happy Returns as it. And when I did that episode, I did a skim through, but I did like a full proper reread for this. And so I was texting you some notes about it. And what really struck me when doing this reread was how specific an era this feels like, and how embracing of the time it was a part of, because it's trying to be that relaunch. It's really looking at where the DC universe was at that moment, but being the end of the Supergirl series, it as a result feels kind of like this handoff into the future, away from what was the Triangle era of Superman, like, or at least these elements of the Triangle era, like, you know, the like Superboy shows up in this, and he's still Con-El, as a new name for him, but he's the clone of Paul Westfield. He's not related to Superman, and as a result is able to flirt with Supergirl, and it's not gross in this. I believe a year later that retcon would occur, and he would maybe 2 years later, the Jeff Johns Titans run would occur, and that would change him to being a clone of Superman, which he had not been previously. So that there's like that dynamic, and there's elements like there's Hal Jordan as the Spectre, which feels like a tangential character, but when you consider the fact that the reason Hal Jordan is the Spectre is a downwind effect of the Death and Return of Superman arc.
Right.
Like it's part of this whole universe, and just Linda Danvers, just the Matrix entity Supergirl. Like, how Triangle era can we be? Like I have a joke on my own shows, Men of Steel. Every time we bring her up, that I will just do a long explanation of the character because she is so convoluted. She is so weird. It's comic book as all hell, and I love that about the character. But I mean, I can't imagine trying to explain who Linda Danvers is in this book without from the full story of it without people going cross-eyed. It's just so weird. Uh,
Yeah.
and this arc is doing its best to make this as palatable, to make it as new reader friendly as possible. So it's very it's very explanatory of all these elements of it all. But looking at it from the perspective of 23, oh my God, years later, it is the snapshot of a time right before things changed dramatically. Again, we're getting CIR-EL at the same time, which is its own thing. But then when we get the reintroduction of Kara Zor-El formally in World's Finest, then it is that's a new era for the character. That is the status quo until we get to New 52.
Yeah, this arc really is a moment in time here for all of those reasons. And yeah, I mean, this has been a running thread as we've been talking about this iteration of Supergirl from Matrix forward, that, yeah, it's weird. It's great. And I think if you really dive in, there's wonderful material here. But yeah, if you are trying to explain it to the uninitiated, it does take a bit much. I do like how in Many Happy Returns, that fact is acknowledged. And there are a couple of instances where Linda is asked how she got her powers, how she became Supergirl. And she's like, it's really complicated, but basically a miracle.
Right.
Which works on a couple of levels, especially going back to the biblical aspect of everything that came before. Now, circling back to what Peter David intended or how this came to be and where he was planning to go. So I found this on his old blog, his old website, and I think this might mirror what is written in his introduction to the trade paperback. But from his website here, he says, "When I first embarked on the storyline, I was told by the powers that be that I could use Kara for 6 issues. That was it. 6 issues, no more. I hoped to change their minds, because I was positive the addition of Kara would bring in readers in droves. What I was hoping was that the support and interest for the series would be so major, so undeniable, so impossible to ignore, that I could use it as ammo to convince the powers that be to change their mind and allow me to keep the character around. If that had happened, my intention was to turn the book into, effectively, a team book, the S equivalent of Birds of Prey. Linda would have been Superwoman, for want of a better name. Kara would have been officially Supergirl, and I would have brought in Power Girl to boot. The tone of the book would have been straight up fun, 3 super blondes getting into adventures. In my truly demented best-case scenario, I would have subtitled the book Blonde Justice. That was my A plan. Unfortunately, the lack of support up front torpedoed it. Had we seen the kind of support for issue 75 that we wound up getting with issue 80 and built from there, I might have been able to pull it off. As it was, I wasn't. The B plan was a continuing storyline with Linda, about which I will not, at this time, go into detail, except to say that Supergirl fans should keep reading my DC work." And that, of course, was a reference to the Fallen Angel series that he would do first at DC, and then it would move over to IDW. But Blonde Justice, what we almost had, what we could have had.
Yeah, it's very similar to the forward, to the point where it's not, the wording is not exactly the same, but I think he probably copy pasted some of that and just rewrote it a little bit. But yeah, Blonde Justice, Linda, Kara, and then Karen, or Paige as she is nowadays. But
as I'm reading that and just remembering back to the buzz at the time, no pun intended, the character buzz, right, not in these final issues, but there was just a lot of buzz about this book as these final issues, as they turned out to be the final issues, were coming out. And look, I don't know all the behind the scenes. I don't know as far as the mechanics of how much lead time they would need and what else was already in motion. I don't know, but this arc ran for 6 months. I mean, it feels like they had opportunity to see the response to it and could have made a move, even if it wasn't exactly what Peter David was pitching. But it just seems like they maybe were ready to kind of move on from this iteration. It's kind of my gut sense that I get without, again, knowing the actual behind the scenes.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I remember, and I didn't reread it for this, but in the foreword for the World's Fine or Batman Superman World's Finest, the introduction of Supergirl arc, there was a whole thing about how Dan Didio talked with Jeff Loeb and how he wanted it to get back to the point where it was CIR-EL. Um, it is cleaner. Like there, because there's other things about this that I think make this book confusing when viewed from with hindsight. Like the fact that Linda is wearing the animated series outfit, and then we have a separate CIR-EL character. When the animated series version, Kara Enzi is supposed to be the CIR-EL equivalent in that show. Like, I think that makes a confusing detail there. It made sense for her to start wearing the costume in the first place, like especially in the post Angel state of things. But when you get into this book and you have two Supergirls, it does become like it's a good visual signifier, but it does get to the point where you're like, wait, so what is the deal with the other Supergirl? She's more senior for some reason. Like
Right.
if you don't know what you're looking at, it's confusing. And then you have this much just simpler like log line character in the form of CIR-EL, where it's like, no, that Superman's cousin. Boom.
No, look, I can't argue that. But at the same time, what I will say, and I think it's worth mentioning, is that when I read Many Happy Returns for the first time, like I said, I hadn't read this book in 60, 70 issues, and I jumped on with this, and I don't have any recollection of feeling confused. So as essentially a new reader to that title, I was on board with it. But still, I think the point is well taken. I want to circle back to a couple of things you were mentioning before, and you were talking about your experience with all of this. Because like I said, it sounds so familiar as I'm hearing you talk about it, because it was similar to the experience that I had where, yeah, this was arguably my first real exposure to the Kara Zor-El iteration of the character. I'm almost positive I had read Crisis on Infinite Earths at this point, so I had at least seen her death, but as impactful as that moment was, that's the end point of the story. I didn't experience what came before. And of course, she had that brief appearance in Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow. But I mean, honestly, I think those would have been the only two instances where I had read anything featuring that version of the character before this. So a really pivotal point in my journey there. And then building off of this whole idea of blonde justice and where Peter David wanted to go, I guess I continue to be struck by how this girl gang approach to the character or to a Supergirl title keeps popping up, right? Obviously, Peter David wanted to go down that route. When I had Sterling Gates here, he was talking about this whole plan he had for Supergirl. If he stayed on the title, it was going to build to a Death of Supergirl storyline that would culminate in Supergirl 75. She would go to hell. There, she would encounter Linda Danvers. She would encounter her mother, Allura. They were going to continue. He had larger plans for Linda to be a part of the book and to delve more into the supernatural side of things. Now in the current Sophie Campbell series, she's got that whole girl gang going. No Linda Danvers yet, other than, of course, Kara's civilian identity, but no,
Right.
no Peter David, Linda Danvers. Boy, this does get confusing. You're right. So she's not there yet, but we have Leslie Lar and Luna Lustrum and all those characters. So like the whole girl gang idea, it keeps popping up. In a lot of these instances, it's not coming to fruition, but it's just interesting to me that there is this instinct from multiple creators across a good span of years here to do something like this.
I think the super family lends itself to a collaborative sense with characters. Like they are team players. Like the reason why they often operate solo is just because of the scale of power that they have. But once you have other characters of similar scales, it makes sense for them to get along and work together because they are such well-meaning individuals with who don't mind sharing the spotlight with others. So I think that there is an element there where they just sort of naturally fall into that. And then I think especially with characters like Supergirl, outside of Superman, like Superman has such an established cast and such an, like everyone knows about all like the world of Superman, and you can have a story about Clark Kent and all that. With Supergirl, she, no matter how well you establish the cast for her, they just don't have the cachet that Lois Lane or Jimmy Olsen are going to have. And so there is an element of being like, well, let's have them play nice with other superheroes and like have that be part of the supporting cast and build out the sort of like sorority of characters.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess segueing a little bit more specifically into this Many Happy Returns arc, these 6 issues here. But so in part 1 of Many Happy Returns, we have Linda returning to her life in Leesburg, reuniting with her parents. She's surprised to find out that her mother, Sylvia, is pregnant.
I have such an objection to that scene
Because of the age?
Yes.
Go, yeah, I'm with you. Go for it.
Damn it.
No, you can take it away.
She opens the door and she's like super pregnant. And it's like, Mom, how can you be pregnant? And it's like, I'm only 42. And I will say this as someone who just had a child, and my wife and I are both 42. Like, it, God, it's so it's frustrating that it's like, how can you have a child that old? And to the book's credit, at least they're like, no, everything's fine. Like, yes, we have a few more tests, but like the baby's going to be fine, and ultimately the baby is fine. But between that and the fact that it's a reminder that Linda, by definition, has to be like so young, and then she's like presented as being kind of an adult compared to the teenagers, it makes my brain hurt a little bit just in terms of ages for characters.
Yeah, look, that knocked me back a little bit too, as someone who recently turned 39. 40 is on the horizon. And I was like, oh, but then at the same time, like we're saying, I mean, this came out 23 years ago, right? Like when you put it in the context, because I'm thinking, I don't know, in my head, I'm the same age I've always been reading these stories, but it's like, no, an awful lot of time has passed since I read this for the first time. And yeah, I guess when you do the math and factor in how old Linda is, how old we assume she is, like, yeah, no, it checks out. But yeah, there was definitely that moment of like, oh, that's not what I was expecting.
Like, it kind of makes sense. It's a cop family. And I'm assuming that's not too different from a military family. Now, obviously, it doesn't have the factor of like going overseas aspect of it, but like that, tends to be like have kids younger kind of situation. Like, so the math almost where it snags me is that she then becomes a teacher. Like,
yes. Yeah.
She's got to be like 22, 23, which means her mom was like 20 when she had her.
Yeah, I think that's what we're meant to assume. But I guess staying on this thread of the supporting cast for just a moment here. So yeah, we have this reunion with Fred and Sylvia. We find out that they're pregnant. At the very end, and we'll circle back to this moment, but Sylvia does give birth to the baby, whom they name Wally, right? In a nod to Wally, the God Boy, who had appeared earlier in the series and presented himself as God and had these really pivotal encounters with Supergirl. So we're back with Fred and Sylvia, and we also catch up later on with Cutter and Maddie, and Linda learns that they've gotten engaged. And there's also this critical moment where one of the villains attacks the high school gymnasium, where they both, at long last, discover that Linda is Supergirl. And unfortunately, there's not too much more to say, I guess, about the supporting cast in these issues. That's really the main thrust of it. But I wanted to mention it because I really did miss them in the second chunk of the series when Linda and Buzz go on their road trip. And I understand. And there were occasional check-ins with them along the way. But for the most part, we weren't in Leesburg anymore. So you didn't have that time with the supporting cast. So I was glad to see them back here. And I really did miss them. And that hit home even more when we caught up with them.
Yeah, and Cutter actually provides the best moment in terms of trying to simplify the story of Linda Danvers, where it's just like, how could this be? The old Supergirl must have transferred her powers. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so in that first issue, we have the crash landing of this rocket that Linda goes to investigate. I do love there's this moment where she's like, oh, I hope it's not another Imperiex probe. It's like, yes, our Worlds at War reference.
Also talking about like the specific snapshot of when this book is coming out.
This podcast is an affiliate of BCW Supplies. The next time you need to restock on comic book bags, boards, boxes, and more, be sure to use promo code FSP to save 10% on your order. That's FSP for Flat Squirrel Productions. It helps support the show too. Thank you. I talk about Smallville a lot, but when it comes to listening, one podcast is at the top of my queue. Always hold on to Smallville, hosted by our pal, Zach Moore. Zach and his guests bring tremendous insight, passion, and humor to each and every episode. And while their series rewatch has concluded, the podcast continues with more great Smallville and Superman talk. Listen wherever you get podcasts and keep an eye out for the other shows on the Always Hold On To network. We love digging into epic comic book runs, but what about the art of the single issue? Single Bound is a podcast series hosted by married couple Amy and Logan as they review single issues of comics, many of them starring the Man of Steel, Logan's favorite character. Listen and subscribe on Spotify and YouTube, and follow the show on Instagram at Single Bound Podcast. Ever wonder what would happen if a person who knew barely anything about comics decided to absorb hundreds of Superman stories from all eras and media? That's exactly what Robbo is doing on This Podcast Will Never Die, which starts with all the ways the Man of Steel stood out on the newsstands in 1938. Listen and subscribe to This Podcast Will Never Die, and you'll never look at Superman's trunks the same way again. But so Linda goes to investigate the crash landing, thinks it might be one of these Imperiex probes, but instead it bears the pre-crisis Kara Zor-El right out of the Silver Age, the look with the blue top and blue skirt, introducing herself as Kara Zor-El from Krypton, not a scratch on me. And right from the jump, you see that characterization that will persist throughout the storyline here, although she will have her darker moments, but really that innocent Silver Age iteration of the character, which from the jump and throughout the story, I thought really worked nicely to have that contrast, that juxtaposition between the more hardened Linda and the really young, innocent, naive Kara Zor-El. I like that dynamic.
Yes, the dynamic was fantastic. That's one of the reasons why the story just like worked so well for me. Like the Linda had been, the journey of Linda as this troubled soul who like learns maturity and responsibility by way of being literally touched by an angel. We have come full circle to her now being this more adult figure. Again, it makes sense for her to become a teacher in the narrative sense. It's just the math of the years doesn't quite make sense.
Fair. But I will say, going back to the earlier issues, there had been talk of her starting, though not finishing college. So I think from the jump, she was always meant to be college age-ish and nebulous as far as how much time is meant to have passed since the start of the series, I suppose. But yeah, I can kind of wrap my head around her being in her early 20s.
Right. Linda's not the problem. It's her mom.
Fair enough. But I guess staying on that thread here, like we've been referencing a little bit later into this arc, Linda will be invited to teach art at the local high school, and perfectly in keeping with what we had seen from her earlier in the series, where she was the sculptor and started leaning into angel imagery after becoming the Earthborn Angel and all of that. And so as we get deeper into this, and I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but we have her set up now as this art teacher, and we have Kara Zor-El as a student at the school, and getting a little overzealous and using her powers during a volleyball game and sending the ball flying through the school and earning the unwanted attention of her classmates. And I say all of this to say, I guess one of the other reasons why it just so bums me out that this was the last arc and Peter David didn't get to pursue his plans, because it's like, oh man, this actually could have been a great status quo. I felt like we had some wonderful setup here that unfortunately really only gets to play out for an issue and a half. But I felt like we had some good pieces in place. And there's that moment, I guess the night before they start at the school, where they're falling asleep in Linda's room at the Danvers house. And Kara's asking all these questions about, are we heroes? And what does it mean to be a hero? And I just thought that back and forth was really interesting and leaned into this age difference. And so I think maybe that's the thing about this, that's other than it being such a loving send up of Silver Age. I think that's the other thing where you really see how these two versions of the same character can coexist and have their own avenues to explore. And I think making Linda a little older, for example, that big sister mode worked great. I felt like the setup here was fantastic.
Yeah, it's so good. And that scene is so good. Like the when it pulls back and you realize that they're sleeping in the air, as they are having this little slumber party kind of moment together. It's just such it's exactly what we go to Superman stuff for, where it's ordinary things done on a super scale, cool superpower twists on stuff that we can relate to. So two girls trying to fall asleep, but just chatting in bed, But it's like, oh, but with superpowers, so they're flying like that. It's such a nice moment there, and you get like I was such a huge Peter David fan, like going into my comic book fandom and then throughout, and like does everything hold up super well? Not necessarily. Like, again, like I'm not talking about specifically this comic. I'm just talking about his writing in general. But a lot of the big books that people like talk about are 20, 30 years old at this point, and there's going to be elements that don't hold up, and that that's fine. Like he was doing the best that he could at the time. Um, but he has such a great voice and a great ability to find the voices of the characters. Like you said, the big sister element. Like, you have such a defined personality for Linda, even if you weren't reading the book up until this point. Like, she gets defined so well, like just in the little bit that you read in the first issue before we get to it. Just in the handstand scene, you get such a great interaction between the two of them, where you're like, I know exactly who this person is and who this person is, if you're actually reading it. Again, if you are a reader or rather a layperson who just picks up the issue and flips through it or without like really stopping to read it, that's where it gets kind of confusing. But when you're actually reading the issues, like, David does an excellent job explaining who people are and how they are distinct individuals in interacting with each other.
So as far as what transpires here, I know we jumped ahead a little bit, but kind of doubling back to that arrival, they are initially interrupted by a villain who's seeking revenge on Linda's Johnny Rebel character. But once we get past that, yeah, Linda and Kara don't get off on on a great note there, because Linda understandably thinks this is a trick, a plot of some sort, namely one by Buzz, and really gets in Kara's face. And Kara gets really upset. She's like, "Why are you so mean?" and flies off. So right from the jump, right, seeing that contrast in attitude and personality and storytelling sensibilities. Like, these are two characters, like, very clearly from different eras of the comic book history. So as far as, well, how did Kara end up here and what's kind of going on in the background of all of this? So we meet two new villains, well, three, including Johnny Rebel, I suppose, but the more significant adversaries here in this arc are Fatalist and the one he works for/with, although Fatalist has his own agenda, as we see, but Xenon, right? That's his name?
Yeah, Xenon.
Right. So the background on this is that at some point, Xenon battled and was defeated by a future Supergirl who imprisoned him in this castle type structure at the beginning of time, and he's stuck there. And now he's been capturing and killing all of these Supergirls from across time and different realities in the hopes that he'll ultimately find the one who will ultimately imprison him. And thus he'll be able to undo his fate here. And of course, he's just got all of this hatred and anger towards anyone who bears the mantle of Supergirl. So that's kind of what's going on in the background. Where I say Fatalist has his own agenda here is that, yeah, he takes it upon himself to reroute Kara-Zor-El's rocket into this universe. And yeah, I don't know that we're really ever given a satisfactory explanation for what his exact agenda was, unless he really is simply living up to his name, that he subscribes to this philosophical theory of fatalism, that whatever will be, and it doesn't really matter what anyone does because whatever happens is what's meant to happen, and thus you should just do whatever you want. I mean, that seems to be the gist of it. Did you discern anything more significant from him?
No, aside from the fact that it just seems like I have seen several times when Peter David series have been cut short, and how he has to sort of like wrap up a lot of the ideas that would probably have been drawn out over time. So this very condensed, like, okay, the Spectre and Fatalist are going to talk to each other, and we're just going to sort of establish like lay all the cards on the table right here kind of moment. Yeah. Interesting idea. Think that a lot more could have been done with this character. I don't think he ever reappears. But a fascinating additional cosmic force. I will say, rereading it, especially with the role of Spectre and Fatalist, like discussing God and so forth, I forgot how religious this book was.
Oh yeah.
Like not that obviously there's the Earthborn Angel elements and all that. But what I mean by I forgot is that, like, I have personally gone on my own like religious journey. I was brought up Catholic, went to Catholic school until I was 18. So like when I was reading these issues when they first came out, it was just sort of like, yeah, there's angels. Yeah, that's fine. And now as a much more agnostic adult, 23 years later, looking back at this, it's like, oh yeah, there's a lot of just like taking for granted that God exists in this book, which, admittedly, they have a lot of proof to go off of, but
Zariel's on the Justice League,
yeah.
No, and I've talked about this in previous episodes. No, it sounds like we've had similar journeys on that front as well. So no, I'm totally with you. I'm totally with you on that. But yeah, I mean, as far as our antagonists and the more, I guess, plot-based portion of this, that's kind of what we have going on here with this being Xenon, who's tracking down all of these Supergirls to kill them, ultimately trying to free himself, and Fatalist being responsible for Kara's rocket landing here. So yeah, they don't get off on a great note, and Supergirl takes off looking for, or Supergirl, the Kara-Zor-El Supergirl takes off looking for Superman.
It's gonna get complicated. Yep. Yeah.
I've been doing pretty well so far over these episodes, but yeah, bear with us. And ends up stumbling upon this parade in Metropolis where Mxyzptlk is up to no good, and they all have to work together to save the day. And to your earlier point, Linda has called in CIR-EL for backup here. She thought that someone younger, going back to this age business, but someone younger maybe could relate a little bit more to Kara to try to get her to settle down and all of that. And throughout that second part of the story, we're jumping back and forth between the events at the parade where we're stopping Mxyzptlk and a really despondent Kara-Zor-El at Star Labs, where she's been studied and she's been telling more of her story. And here's another instance where you have Kitty Faulkner and her associates at the lab, talking about the absurdity of this origin story that Kara-Zor-El has spun about a floating city and this air pocket and her super telescope where she's been able to observe events on Earth in present day, right? All of those beats of that traditional origin story. Like we said, we have a little fun at its expense, but still I thought was interesting as it played out here.
What is really good about Peter David's writing is exploring like the pathos of a character existing in these like crazy situations, and to exist in a Silver Age setting with the Silver Age sensibilities, like that is just, it's bonkers. But at the same time, like you get to experience a truly like isolated Kara-Zor-El, and really get to the heart of her emotion in the situation and how people are going to perceive her, but how she understands she's being perceived. Like I said, it was very in vogue in the 90s to have conversations about the absurdity of the 60s. I think across the, like I think in all media there was an element of that. I mean, this is the era of like Forrest Gump. I mean, this is 10 years after Forrest Gump, but like it's still in a period of people like looking back at at the history of the boomers and having sort of fun dissections of that with a 90s lens as the next generation was kind of growing up.
Yeah. And I think it's in that second part, but it's somewhere in this arc where Kara's upset. She's upset that her world is gone and her parents are gone. And that's one of those things when we talked about all those Silver Age stories, as much as we continued to issue the disqualifier, the disclaimer that we recognize was a different time intended for a really young audience. We weren't necessarily expecting a deep dive into the emotional side and the trauma of the character. Still, it's like, you read those issues and it's like, she's okay. So to kind of just have these moments here, they just really went a long way. So I really appreciated that. And that same idea came up when we talked about the DC animated universe. Similar thing there where Kara is just like, boom, she's off and running. So like I said, moments like that really went a long way. And I guess the other reason in that issue in particular why Kara is at such a low point is that she had her moment with Superman at the parade, but it was after she had been hit with kryptonite and wasn't at her full power. And it seems Superman just mistook her for one of these other parade goers who was in costume there, and really has to let her down because she talked, I'm here, I can help you. And clearly this is something he's heard from others along the way and really wants to disabuse her of this notion because obviously he doesn't realize who she is. So she's at a tough spot at that point.
Yeah, it's a good scene, and because Superman makes so much sense when you read it. you're like, yeah, no, he's definitely dealt with this whole situation. And here's this like young girl at the background for the scene is that it is a parade for superhero fans. So there's just tons of people dressed up as super characters. So like she doesn't look any different from anyone else. And the fact that she doesn't have the ability, at least as far as we can see, to immediately show off her powers, and he doesn't really give her the chance. There's no way for her to prove anything, and he just doesn't have time for it. He just dealt with a fifth dimensional imp situation, um, and is now having a girl be like, no, I can help you, and it's like, no, you really can't. He's being a voice of reason, but it's so heartbreaking for her. She like all she wants is to find her cousin and find her place, and he can't accept her because the logistics of the world don't even allow for her.
Yeah, I mean, I guess him being Superman being a dick to a freshly arrived Supergirl, I guess is kind of common. But no, I agree with you. It's not that he's being a dick per se here. Keeping in mind what his perspective is of the situation, and he doesn't realize the full facts before him, I think what he says is perfectly reasonable. I guess that one of the things I was struck by, and I can't help but feel like it was something they left on the table, was a true moment between Superman and this CIR-EL. Now, we will get something because in the midst of this 6-issue Many Happy Returns arc, there was that Superman versus Darkseid Apocalypse Now one-shot. I don't know if you recall this, but it was essentially the capper to the Mark Schultz Man of Steel series, which had just been canceled.
I have not read that issue, but they reference it in this.
They do reference it here. We do get an editor's note, and Kara, as she's flying at the beginning of the issue, she's like, "Oh, I finally met Superman." So yeah, there was this one shot that wrapped up what Mark Schultz had been doing. There was all that business with Steel being taken over by that entropy armor that Darkseid had created during our Worlds at War, and then Steel was taken, and they had to go rescue him, and so Superman put together the squad, and so you did have both Linda and CIR-EL. So she was in the mix there, but that was not a story that was built for like a heart to heart or anything like that. So hey, I don't know, was that missing for you here, like having a proper scene between the two of them, or did you feel like we didn't need it?
I feel like we didn't need it. Like the fact that they actually met each other almost like kind of makes it like not worse, but like because this is a story about how the two Supergirls interact with each other. Like ultimately, like while you want it, I was satisfied with the dismissal scene that we get in this book.
Okay, fair enough. And hey, we're going to have plenty more with Superman as we get to our last couple of chapters of the story here. So Superman, I think, is ultimately well represented in the story, just in a different way than than maybe you would expect at first glance. And then, once we get into essentially the midpoint of this Many Happy Returns arc, we have a lot of what we've already talked about of this new brief, as it turns out to be, status quo at the high school, which is attacked by this Johnny Rebel character. But then we have the intervention of the Hal Jordan Spectre to point out that the natural order of events has been upset, usurped by Kara's arrival in this reality, and that she must return to the reality she was plucked from and live out her life there so that she can make this ultimate sacrifice in Crisis on Infinite Earths. And we get a shot of that iconic moment of Superman holding the fallen CIR-EL right out of Crisis. And Kara does not take it well, as you would expect, right?
Yes. I mean, it's a character who's already, who we, as we've established, they're actually allowing what is this like truly traumatic series of events in her backstory to play out and have some pathos, and then to be told, and you're going to die.
And this is where Linda has her moment where she's like, okay, why don't you go back to the school, check on our villain. I'll talk to the Spectre and see if we can figure it out. And as soon as Kara takes off, we get Linda's narration, and she's like, I wonder how long it'll take her to realize. I wonder if she'll get all the way to the high school, or if she'll realize along the way, or maybe she's already eavesdropping, right? Because the twist here is that Linda's not going to try to reason with the Spectre. She's going to take Kara's place and get in that rocket and return to the world that Kara was meant to go to. And really her only explanation there, she quotes Fatalist and says it seemed like a good idea at the time. And I suppose in a lot of ways, this ties back to that conversation about heroism that Kara and Linda had been having earlier. I guess my question to you is, yeah, how does Linda's decision to take Kara's place sit with you?
I think it contributes to the legacy of Supergirl being very different than the way that she was introduced in the first place. You know, there were a lot of false starts before we get, well, I shouldn't say a lot. There was the Genie Supergirl, or the Magic Totem Supergirl,
Sure.
before we get Kara Zor-El. Initially she was created kind of as, again, the, like, we're taking a super spin on things that you understand, like having a kid sister type character that can hang around with you and be um like be this character that can be friends and family to Superman. Like, beginning with her death in Crisis on Infinite Earths, there has been a perpetual state of the character becoming more and more a one who will sacrifice herself for the greater good, and for the people she loves, and has this sort of maternal quality to her, like like not motherly per se, but the this custodial quality, like, that Supergirl slowly has been recontextualized as being someone who is a babysitter, and who is um a being who will go to this distance to, like I said, sacrifice themselves in this moment. And I think this is like one of those things that are like pushing subtly the actual mythos of the character into this direction of being someone who will take that sacrifice. And like, it's well set up in the story, and it like doesn't necessarily have to have this larger context. But when you consider the fact that, like, when Kara is then formally reintroduced to the DCU, she's restructured as being Superman's older cousin, as opposed to his younger cousin, and that she was supposed to protect him this whole period. And the fact that we see elements even going back to the Totem Supergirl, like she dies in that first story arc saving Superman from kryptonite, like, not completely, like, but she's mortally wounded by it, and they have to, like, wish her away. And that has slowly changed Supergirl into a character that is like, that sacrifice, or that willingness to sacrifice herself, is much more baked into Supergirl than it is for Superman. Like, and this is just a moment where it is really making Linda Danvers fit that mold even better.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I get where you're coming from on that. And I think even at this point in the story, I mean, we're a good few chapters into it, I suppose, but still only a few issues. Yet I do think they have done a good job of building up this big sister, little sister dynamic, and showing how Linda has really taken Kara under her wing. So it's not the sort of thing where I'm like, I don't buy it at all. I get it. Nevertheless, like, there is something about it that doesn't, like, totally sit right with me. And I don't know that I've absolutely pinpointed it, but I think it's crystallizing as we're talking. I think it's that there's no attempt on Linda's part to say goodbye to anybody or leave any message. Now, when we get to the end of the arc and Linda bids Leesburg farewell, there is this letter that she writes to Clark. And obviously you don't want to undercut that with another attempt at goodbye earlier on. Like, I get that as far as the overall picture here, but I think maybe that was the thing. Not even so much that she would be willing to make this sacrifice, but I think it was more kind of how quickly she was ready to give up this life in Leesburg that she had just gotten back to. I think that's the thing, just kind of factoring in where we are with her at this point. I think there might have been other points in this Supergirl's journey along the way where I would have bought it a little bit more, because we had seen her brought down pretty low at various points along the way, but I didn't feel like that's where we were now. And so I think it was how quickly she was willing to give it up without, like, any attempt to get any word to the people in her life. That was the one aspect, I think, that just didn't really click with me.
Yeah. It's funny. This is one of those points where where it's like the joke that, like, a cell phone would have ruined the movie. Like, like we're just before, like, everyone having cell phones. Like, most of us had cell phones at this point. but a text message really would have gone a long way, even just to her parents.
Step into the refraction with Drunken Avenger #1, The Volunteer, an indie comic by Rick Reason that turns the tropes upside down. 4 men died in 9 seconds. John Stevens survived, but survival has a price. Now, the government calls him a variable. The media calls him the Drunken Avenger. And the city of Meridian is caught in the crossfire between civil liberty and national security. Follow @Drunken Avenger on social media for project updates and previews. My comic shop closed over a decade ago, but if there's one place where I feel that same sense of camaraderie, it's Fat Moose Comics, New Jersey's best and oldest comic book store, led by current owner Sean Hendricks. If you're looking for something and they don't have it, they can probably get it for you. They know a guy. Visit Fat Moose in Whippany, New Jersey, and be sure to reach out via the Fat Moose Comics Facebook page. I'm a parent, which means that a family-friendly comic shop is a must, and there's none better than Aw Yeah Comics. Visit one of their 3 locations, Harrison, New York, Muncie, Indiana, or Skokie, Illinois, home to our pal, Sweet Sweet Bernie. Follow them on social media and at awyeahcomics.com for news about signings, live sales, and much more. Their name says exactly how they feel about it. Say it with me now. Aw yeah. So now, really, as we get close to the climax of the story here, we have this fascinating issue, Chapter 5, where we follow Linda to Kara Zor-El's world that she was originally meant to land on. But right from the jump, I thought that initial meeting with Superman, hilarious, right?
Yes.
As Linda is realizing that initially, like, she's trying to fit the mold of this Kara Zor-El. Like, she realizes, okay, I'm taking someone else's place in time in this reality. Like, I need to kind of be as much like her as possible, but very quickly realizes, like we were saying, the absurdity of the story that she's spinning here and is trying to fill in and account for all of these gaps and plot holes as best she can. It was so funny.
Yeah, I think when she tries to tell the story, it's great because it's clear that she barely paid attention at first,
right?
Because it just sounded like gobbledygook, and so she's trying to remember all the details, but it's so absurd that she can't, like, it didn't make sense to her the first time, so now trying to repeat it, it doesn't quite, like, she can't tell it in a way that, like, she believes it.
It's genuinely comical, but I think the kicker to all of this is that as much as for those initial moments, she's trying to take the place as closely as she can of Kara Zor-El. The second that Superman, just like he did in the Silver Age, says, "Oh, well, you can be my emergency secret weapon," she's like, "Oh, hell no. Like, we're not doing that." And then we turn the page and it's Superman unveiling her to the world, which of course does harken back to a moment we would ultimately get in those initial Kara Zor-El comics, although it took quite a while before we did.
Yeah, the Supergirl quinceañera issue.
Yes, exactly. So I just, like, that was so funny on a number of levels. I mean, but just like how quickly she abandoned this initial goal of trying to live the life that Kara would have lived. And then yet another instance of really sending up that classic Silver Age iteration of, oh, emergency secret weapon. It's like, no, she's not standing for that. So that was genuinely funny.
Yeah, it's hilarious. It's hilarious. It does lead into one of the things in this book that doesn't hold up that well, which is the pink kryptonite scene.
This is the pink. This is the big, the infamous pink kryptonite moment. But I guess before that, as this issue unfolds, we are cutting back and forth between Linda in the Silver Age, we'll just call it that for shorthand, versus Kara Zor-El in Leesburg. And time is passing very differently. So, like, it's only a matter of a few hours for Kara, whereas Linda is living years in the Silver Age and loves it. Loves it. She's like, these have been the best 3 years. I feel like I'm living in Pleasantville. It's like everyone is so joyful to be a hero. The villains have all these elaborate plans, but they never kill anybody. Everything's so clean. Just, no one curses, and there's only a few channels, so that takes a little bit getting used to. But it was just interesting to see how she was just embracing and relishing her life on this other Earth. But circling back to your point, yeah, there's this moment where she talks about how, yeah, every now and then things do get a little weird. I seem to be the only one who picks up on the subtext. And then we have this moment where Lois is like, oh yeah, Superman's been acting really weird since he was exposed to that pink kryptonite. And then you have Superman talking to Jimmy with the, I guess, classic line of, did I ever tell you how dashing you look in bow ties, Jimmy?
Right. Like, okay, look, I'm a cis hetero very white man. There's an element of like, well, how much can I say this wasn't that bad at the time? Like, is it my place to say? But I don't remember it being taken so poorly at the time. Usually it's like retrospectives being like, can you believe they once had a pink kryptonite? But it was like, but the scene was a joke. It wasn't like a legitimate thing in the story, and it's specifically a joke in a setting where it's like, how absurd was the Silver Age? Could you even like, and the Silver Age was so absurd, you could even imagine them making a joke in the 60s that this is then a story in the 2000s trying to like create, create this narrative. There's layers to it beyond just being like, oh, but pink kryptonite made him gay. Like the fact is that they're trying to present it in a world where there's all these absurd types of kryptonite and the type of story that you would have done in the 60s.
Yes, that's the thing, right? And that's where I was going with this, where it's like, yes, I think, especially when people are just kind of like grabbing a screenshot of this, putting it on Reddit and like, I can't believe they did this. It's like, I think the larger point to that scene, and it's one panel, but it's a half a page panel. But the point of it that Linda's making is that, yeah, there's this weird stuff that has these other meanings and connotations, but the characters are generally oblivious to it. And it's like, I think that's the ultimate point of it. And yes, the way it's represented is in this specific joke that, again, I don't think would play today. And arguably, I don't know, maybe it would have landed even more if David had pulled from something real, from the Silver Age, some actual absurd bit of business from the Silver Age, and commented on that as opposed to spinning something new. I don't know, but we all recognize, right, some of the silliness that we saw in those Silver Age stories, that obviously the characters like would never comment on or recognize the larger implications of it or things like that. So obviously that's what he was getting at in that moment.
Right. Yeah. Again, the joke wasn't that pink kryptonite is a thing that could conceivably exist in a comic book. It was that the joke was, man, there were a lot of weird ideas back in the day, and this would have been not that far afield from what we actually saw at the time. The red kryptonite stories of the 60s are super in line with this.
Exactly. But then, yeah, I mean, arguably the big twist here is that we do see Linda experiencing this moment of loneliness as she's sitting outside the fortress, and she's joined by Superman, who also is dealing with a bout of loneliness, and reveals that he knows and has always known that she's not actually his cousin, because he very quickly clocked that she was wearing a blonde wig and that her clothes were made of earth fibers. And they enter into this romantic relationship. And in that initial moment, Linda is certainly taken aback, and she's like, but you're supposed to end up with Lois. And he's like, I don't love Lois. He's like, I love you, Kara. And she's like, it's actually Linda. And he introduces himself as Clark, and they kiss, and boom, next page, I think they're married. What did you make of all of this?
So, man, I'm trying to remember how I felt about it before I read the foreword, because the foreword brings up the whole like Superman had this very weird flirty relationship with Kara in the 60s. There's the Superwoman character that was just like a grown up version of Kara that he had like a momentary fling with. They've made references to the fact that Kara's his type. But just that she's his cousin and also young. And so like for Linda to be an adult and not like, Linda in no way was ever related to Superman, and doesn't even have the May side of her anymore to be like, oh, but I was raised by the cancer or anything like that. So it never really bothered me, this was the era after Death and Return of Superman, where like Superboy was like super infatuated with. I've said super multiple times, and I have not been trying to make that pun. But yeah, Superboy was like extremely infatuated with the Matrix entity Supergirl. Was kind of fine, and in the context of this story where we're getting these like big time jumps and so forth, like jumping to them being married and whatnot, it was like I can see it, like the establishment of there being two isolated individuals dealing with powers of the scale that they are in this world, it makes sense that they would gravitate towards each other and find a connection. Like, yeah, this is a book where there's several points where people in the super family are all into each other. Superboy is into CIR-EL, Linda Danvers is into Superman. Like, but it's still it was fine. I guess is what I'm getting at. It made enough sense in the story.
It made enough sense in the story. Yeah, and I think it went a long way that you find out, like I said, that Superman knew from the jump that this wasn't actually his cousin. Right? And he explains, like, I thought you were an enemy at some point and I wanted to see this play out. And then obviously realized that wasn't the case. And, he just didn't care and grew to know her. But yeah, if it had been, he thought they were cousins all along. And now all of a sudden he found out and he's like, oh, we're not cousins. Well, let's get together. That I would not have cared for.
That would have been weird.
Right.
Yes.
But the fact that like he knew all along and obviously she knew all along that they weren't related. It's like, okay, I can buy this. And I think the rest of your points hold. And yes, I know that Silver Age story that you're referring to where Supergirl like really takes it upon herself to find a mate for Superman. And specifically finds him this woman on another world who really is just like an older version of Kara. So yeah, we're a bit of business there, and I don't know whether Peter David was specifically drawing any inspiration from those forerunners to CIR-EL that you've been referencing, right? We did, and we talked about this when we did our Silver Age episode. In the years leading up to CIR-EL's debut in the comics, you did have these other iterations. And Lois Lane with powers, right, was an early Superwoman. So there were these other versions, and it wasn't until CIR-EL that there was this familial angle. Like prior to that, in most of the instances, there was some possibility of a romantic pairing with Superman. So intentional or otherwise, there's some basis for kind of what we get here.
Yeah. Again, the totem Supergirl that we've referenced, the true prototype Supergirl, was seen as a romantic rival for Lois Lane, and was thought that Lois was like, oh, I will never measure up to Supergirl. Supergirl is Superman, but a girl. He will totally love her. They're meant for each other, and so here, their powers are different, but their powers are of a magnitude similarity, and so like there's an element of the pressures of the world that makes sense that they would be compatible.
Yeah. I mean, look, along the way, if Linda Danvers had ever expressed any interest in Superman in our world, that would have gone a long way. Or if this hadn't been a mere 6 issues and we could have actually had more time and see more moments between them. But I think Peter David and Ed Benes, I think they're able to accomplish a lot here, even in just that scene outside the fortress where they're commiserating over their loneliness. So I can get on board with it. Even more so because, ultimately at the end of the day with this Linda Superman pairing, it's a means to an end to get to their daughter, Ariella. Right. Because the daughter, more than anything, I mean, obviously Linda wouldn't want to part with her husband either, but really when we get to the point where the Spectre returns and explains that, hey, we let you try this, but it's not working. The natural order of events needs to be restored. You need to go back. Kara needs to take her place here at the designated time and live the life that you have usurped. When we get to that point, and now Linda is faced with having to give up this entire life that she's built here, but especially her daughter, Ariella. Oh, and especially for both of us as parents reading it. I mean, that just hit like a ton of bricks, yeah?
Yeah. Yes. And I will say this reread, like I said, I skimmed it before for trade school, but this reread here, I obviously I wasn't a parent when I was in college and read this the first time. I wasn't a parent when I bought the trade probably towards the end of my college or shortly after I was graduated. Like I wasn't a parent for most of the time. I've reread this book over the years. But now to look at it all and to look at the sacrifice of not only would your daughter die, but she would never exist. That's really hard as a parent.
Yeah, it's almost like shades of For the Man Who Has Everything, and especially the animated adaptation. I felt like really drove home what Clark was going through when he had to give up this life that he built specifically with his child. But it's especially heartbreaking because when the Spectre shows up, like Linda thinks, okay, it's time for me to go meet my end. Like this was and that's I think what really adds to this, where she knows the whole time the fate that awaits her, Kara's fate, dying in Crisis on Infinite Earths. And she's fine with that.
There's a sword of Damocles with an S shield like in the hilt.
Yeah. So she was prepared, right? And then this has been a fair trade-off for her to have this life, even knowing that, okay, ultimately the bill's going to come due and she's going to have to make the sacrifice. And that's what she thinks is about to happen. But no, it's that unless she returns and Kara takes her place as she was meant to from the start, all of this will go away as the skies are literally turning red, right? In both realities. And so this is just this impossible choice. Like either she parts with her daughter and this life or everything is gone. And the only way she's able to come to terms with this is this tearful declaration that I'll let it all burn unless my daughter lives. And the Spectre does acquiesce on that front. We're not sure exactly what that means, I suppose, in that initial moment with the Spectre. But then there is this farewell with Ariella because she had been directed to go stay in the vault at the fortress, but she comes back and she wants her mommy. And Linda says she has to go away, but Ariella makes her promise that she'll come back. And Linda's like, I promise. And via narration, Linda says like the lie came more easily.
Yeah.
So I guess it seems like in that moment, even though there's been this deal for her daughter to continue to exist, there does seem to be an awareness on Linda's part that they're not going to be together. Then we have this confrontation with Xenon where, yeah, she is really at this low point, but she's able to access this other power source and defeat him. But then there's this beat where she's waiting for something. Like she's waiting for the Spectre to show up with her daughter and he doesn't. So I guess that's where I like I said, I go back and forth a little bit as far as what exactly her expectation was, or maybe she knew deep down that she was not going to see her daughter, but then there was this moment of hope where she thought maybe she might be rewarded. I guess I don't know exactly what her expectation was vis-a-vis her being with her daughter.
Yeah, I think this is just not a very I think this is just dealing with the fact that it's the crunch of the issue, trying to get all the story ideas out, and that we just don't have enough breathing room for her to or for us to really explore what are the specific stages of her grief and that sort of break her so emotionally by the end of the whole issue.
And she is that's the thing here, because as these final scenes play out, it's so heartbreaking, especially having spent 80 issues with Linda Danvers in her various forms, merged with Matrix, separated from Matrix, big sister to Kara. But there's an emotional numbness that she describes. And when
she's so dead inside by the end,
she's dead inside. Like when she punches out Kara Zor-El to put her back in the rocket, she's like, I should feel terrible about this. I feel nothing. And then she goes to visit Fred and Sylvia and Maddie and Cutter at the hospital and meet her new brother. And she still doesn't feel anything inside. But she sees the baby. She knows instinctively that his name is Wally, even though Fred and Sylvia had just decided and hadn't told her yet. So she seems to take this as a sign that things will be okay. And then she has these dreams that she describes more as divine revelations. And one of the things she sees is her daughter, right, riding the byways of space and time, and knows that she's out there somewhere. And by the way, speaking of Kara, when she returns to her place in the multiverse, I love how, while she didn't remember everything that transpired on our Earth, that it was sort of like a dream to her, that it influenced some of the choices that she made. That was why she chose to call herself Linda Lee. That was a great way to account for what was otherwise kind of a random choice back in those original stories. So I thought that was a really nice touch too. On the note of Ariella, did you ever read the 1 million issue of Supergirl?
I was about to say, doesn't she come back in DC 1 million?
Yeah. Well, the funny, she already appeared, right? So, because the 1 million event was a good few years before this. So yeah, Peter David had already introduced this far future version of Supergirl who is called it's like R''EL, like REL.
Yeah.
And she's in that 1 million issue. She's really like a terror and it's crazy, but I just read it before we said that. And she's inadvertently destroying planets, right? She doesn't realize what she's doing, but she's well-meaning, but truly a terror. But so, yeah, I mean, there is this sense like she is still out there in the far future. Like she has a future out there. All to say that one of the other big things I'm struck by with Many Happy Returns is it's hard to even call it bittersweet. Like it's a real sad note that we go out on here. And I guess the reason why I'm so struck is that you could have easily foreseen a scenario where she is reunited with her daughter, even if it seems like it's not happening in the moment, but then you get that payoff or something like that. And there's a part of me, because I love the character of Linda Danvers, where I'm disappointed that we and she didn't get that. But then at the same time, I mean, I admire the restraint, because I do think that would have been an easier, more predictable ending. And the fact that David had that restraint to hold that back, despite or because of where it leads Linda, to the point that she leaves her life in Leesburg and encapsulates all of this in a letter that she sends to Clark about how she was filled with all of this hate, but didn't know where to direct it. She couldn't direct it at the title mantle of Supergirl because of how much it had meant to her. So she directed it at herself. Right. So, I mean, I don't know, like, how does that sit with you? The fact that we leave her in this specific place?
Well, I think part of it is that while this is the end of the Peter David Supergirl series, it isn't necessarily what Peter David, Peter David wasn't necessarily done with the character. Like, obviously there's the Fallen Angel stuff. But it ends in such a way that we could come back to her if we wanted to. We're not fully if she was reunited with her daughter and like in some sort of like future state or a paradise dimension or however you wanted to do it, it would feel very final. And there is an element of not fully wanting to put all the toys away in such a manner that they can't be taken out again.
Yeah, no, yeah, I think that makes sense. And, we've referenced Fallen Angel a couple of times here, and it came up in our earlier Earthborn Angel discussion as well. But yeah, Peter David would go on to write this 20-issue DC series, Fallen Angel. And the lead character there, Lee, was always heavily speculated to be Linda Danvers, even though Peter David didn't or couldn't legally say that was the case. But there was always kind of something that seemed to be underneath all of that. That series was canceled at DC and then was resurrected over at IDW. And while I have not read that entire IDW series, I am aware there is a point during that run where we meet Lee's predecessor, Lynn, I believe her name is, or something to that effect. And once again, Peter David could not literally legally say that Lynn was Linda Danvers, but that seemed to be his intention. So yeah, I mean, like, to your point, like, clearly he had more that he wanted to do with the character, or even just the idea of this character beyond this. And so maybe that accounts too for why we went this way. But even just looking at this in a vacuum, like, it makes me sad. And especially given how much I've come to care for this character. But like I said, I admire the restraint and kind of the boldness to go out on a note like this. Because like I said, I think it would have been very easy to put a much happier bow on it.
Yeah. But also there is the sadness of the series itself ending that I think Peter David is trying to get out in this issue.
Well, that's true too. It's not like, oh, this was the triumphant intended conclusion of the series. Right? There was more that he wanted. So I think that's probably fueling it as well. Yeah. I mean, I think it's I don't know. It's like fascinating on a number of levels. And yeah, the fact that this all kind of culminates in this letter to Clark, and we see Clark reading it out loud to Lois. And there's this box of items that's been sent that includes the skateboard.
Yeah, the skateboard.
From the iconic cover to issue 1. I know you talked about this in your trade school episode, because it is that cover to issue 1 by Gary Frank. It's so striking where you see, do you want to describe it for people?
Yeah, so it's so it's very 90s in that it is it's Supergirl with her Supergirl like top on, but then with this like flannel shirt, like button down shirt open and holding the skateboard, and you don't see it's just from the neck down, so it's just the torso. But the skateboard's covered with stickers, and you just get like all this like character texture from it, and what it was doing was selling that like, oh, we we are taking this character who's kind of a blank slate in the form of the Matrix entity Supergirl, and we are bolting on, we're merging the two personas and giving her like all of this like actual human detail to her.
Yeah, and the copy in the house ad was they told her to get a life. They didn't say whose. Right?
Yes.
And what's funny though is that, you know, having now gone through all that material, I think there is an issue where Linda goes skateboarding with the other kids in the town or something like that. But it's not like, oh man, that skateboard was there all the time. But it was so iconic in that first cover, and so to bring it full circle in that last moment there. And yeah, even though Superman did not have a particularly large role to play in this story or the series, like he doesn't make as many appearances across these 80 issues as people might expect. He pops up from time to time. But it felt fitting that we brought it to a close, I thought, with Lois and Clark.
Yeah.
So we mentioned CIR-EL, and like I said, she made her debut in the pages of the Stephen T. Siegel, Scott McDaniel Superman run, which we did a whole episode on a couple of years ago. While Many Happy Returns was going on, and she initially presented as the daughter of Lois and Clark, the daughter of tomorrow. Long story short, and people can go listen to our episode if they want, because I really don't feel like recapping all the future Smith's business, but she came from the future, and we find out at the culmination of that Stephen T. Siegel run that this was all a plot by a future version of Brainiac, and that she was not actually the child of Lois and Clark. She was a human who had been infused with Clark's DNA. And she also had a human civilian persona, Mia. But I guess just overall impressions, I mean, she had a relatively brief run, but still worth mentioning, especially given the proximity in time to Many Happy Returns.
Yeah. So when CIR-EL came out, I was dealing with the fact that we had just lost this version of Supergirl. So I was defensive. I was like, this isn't the Supergirl that I grew up with, nor is it the Supergirl that is like the classic one. This is such a deviation. I think that if it was a character that had either more legs and had continued to be a character, or just in the window of its time that it existed, it's a really cool idea. Like the future daughter of Superman kind of idea, I think is cool. The look is so different. But on the other hand, like being so different, I think like helps her be a very distinct thing. Like it'd be really weird if she was like another blonde character. Like if it was just another version of us doing the CIR-EL look, but like slightly tweaked because for whatever reasons DC doesn't want to allow Superman to have his cousin back. It's a weird look, but it was like, okay, for a future daughter of Superman look, it's not bad. It's not, not necessarily my favorite outfit of all time, but like perfectly fine. In terms of her place in the pantheon, it's an interesting footnote, like in what actually happened.
Interesting footnote. I mean, unfortunately, because she kind of comes and goes so quickly, only really so much to say about her. I mean, she was eager and excitable, right? And clearly wanted to pursue a relationship with Superman, and ultimately does sacrifice herself to help stop Brainiac at the end, even after she's learned that they're not actually biologically related. And there is an idea that Superman conveys to her, essentially like, even if we're not related, like I want to try to help you. So that, that resonated. I guess the larger thought I have about CIR-EL is that just kind of where we are in publishing history here. It's like we had those prototype Supergirls in the years leading up to CIR-EL, but then from 1959 until Crisis, Supergirl was the cousin from Krypton. Like it was so entrenched, so firmly established. But then, after Crisis, we get Matrix, we get the Earthborn Angel, we get Linda Danvers. I mean, arguably like three distinct iterations of that post-Crisis Supergirl. And now CIR-EL, like here's now another spin on a female counterpart to Superman with similar powers. And we also now once again have a familial connection. So there's that. So there are certain like core ideas that are being retained. I guess like it's a long-winded way of saying that you look at kind of an alternate path where either CIR-EL stuck around, or even if CIR-EL left, like you got another non-CIR-EL Linda, Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there's another version where we don't default back to Kara Zor-El, and Supergirl becomes more of this identity that has been spun in even more different ways.
Yes. Yes. I agree that at the time it wasn't necessarily the default that we were going to go back to being the cousin, because DC had tried to like move away from that as the concept so much. So yeah, I mean, I remember being fairly like unenthusiastic about CIR-EL as a character when she first came out. I was like willing to see it out, and like in retrospect, I'm like, this is all fine. And talking about the larger like the themes of Supergirl, the sacrifice theme is part of her as well, and so I think that makes her a worthy member of the sort of pantheon of Supergirls. But it never felt like it was going to have the legs that un, that like a like that the Matrix entity did, or that Kara Zor-El had.
You know, not to knock that run, but I mean, I did a whole episode on it. I then and now have never been particularly enthused. I don't think that Siegel McDaniel run really maybe accomplished what it intended to. I don't know. Talk about it being a footnote. It's not on the app and it's never been collected. So like good luck finding it. You have to track down back issues. So it really is, I think, relatively obscure. And again, she had such a brief tenure. I guess like the idea of a child, whether it's a son or a daughter, and then obviously we've had John Kent, and we know that he's gone in different directions. Like it's intriguing, but I guess the daughter of Superman as Supergirl specifically, and that mantle, and sort of that being the representation of Supergirl at the expense of Kara Zor-El, for example. Yeah, I don't know how well that sits, but I don't know whether I'm not too keen on it because of the idea or because of, I think, the lack of development of CIR-EL. Like, had those stories been stronger, in my opinion, I don't know, maybe I would feel differently. Maybe I'd be sitting here being like, oh man, this character had so much potential, but I don't know that the stories really set her up particularly well.
Yeah, I also like, while it's a cool take on the character, it's not novel. For one thing, we'd already had Superman, Batman Generations at this point, where Supergirl was Superman's daughter. It's Kara, but that's just the nature of that. We'd seen things like like with Supreme. Prior to the Alan Moore run, there was a character Probe, or Lady Supreme, who was supposed to be his daughter from the future. So we the idea of future daughter character isn't by itself like a thing that had never been done before. It was like, oh, this is a mind blowing twist on the, or like new take on the whole thing. So it was all fine, but like I said, it just didn't seem that like it was going to stick. So I didn't have the energy for it, and at the same time, it didn't stick. So like kind of it was just the universe trying to like lash out and find a new Supergirl until we finally like settled back into a new mold, or an old mold, I should say.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I also wonder, I don't know, like, what was the plan here, and what sort of commitment did they have? Or, was she always intended to kind of be taken off the board by the end of that run in Superman 200? Because again, having her show up as early as she did, overlapping with Many Happy Returns, it's like, yeah, I don't know, was this the direction that they were planning? Were they just seeing what popped more with audience members? Like, I don't know. But to your point, it's like, yes, we had other iterations of this. And in fact, just a couple of years earlier in Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Strikes Again, we had the introduction of Lara Kent, the daughter of Superman and Wonder Woman in that universe, who had been hidden away on Paradise Island and then intervenes. So yeah, like the daughter of Superman as Supergirl is definitely an idea, floating around out there. But is there anything else about Many Happy Returns specifically we didn't talk about that we should talk about?
Very, very quick, and this is going to very quick detail. The outfit Supergirl wears towards the end, I love the time jump look that she has, where they take the animated series look and they make it like 3/4 sleeve, and then get rid of the midriff.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it looks it looks really good as this more mature, like Superwoman look for the character. I think it looks really good. I've referenced this before. Like, Benez's art is a little cheesecakey. Like, like he draws very attractive women and
Sure.
whatnot. The problem sometimes be like with this medium is like both appreciating it, but at the same time trying to like not not be like kind of a creep about some of the details. And like the animated series look, I think looked looked great on the show. Looks great in certain artists. I think it. There's even a joke in this where like at one point someone says like she looks a little cheap, uh, like when she's in like the Silver Age period. The updated look when we do the time jump, I think solidifies all of the problems I had with it. But uh, and just looks really consistent and really good is what I want to get at.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, look, I've been a fan of Ed Benis's work. Well, it's funny. I'm trying to remember like would I have read Many Happy Returns before Birds of Prey? Obviously, Many Happy Returns was first, but I didn't read it until the trade later. I don't know, but the clearest early memory of his art I have is that debut issue of Birds of Prey, and I was a fan from the jump, and have enjoyed his work. You know, whenever I've come across it, yes, definitely has those more cheesecakey leanings, but I don't know, it never felt overly salacious or scandalous or anything like
No,
that.
not at all. Like, and I'm not trying to say that this is
Sure.
the good girl art movement as opposed to the bad girl art movement.
But I agree with you wholeheartedly. I'm glad you brought that up. I loved that evolution of her animated series look in the future in that other reality. And had we gotten Blonde Justice and Linda graduated to Superwoman and we leaned more into her as the more seasoned, more mature older sister type with this shift in costume, yeah, I think it would have worked great. It was a fantastic look. So listen, I'm so glad that we carved out the time to really give Many Happy Returns the spotlight. I think it deserves it. I am going to once again issue my call, justice for Linda Danvers, because she leaves the scene at the end of Supergirl 80. She pops up in the final arc of Superman Batman with the Vengeance when all of these Supergirls are being pulled in for a battle. And as Dr. Ange and I talked about a couple of episodes ago, she also has a relatively brief appearance in the Rain and Hell miniseries and is like left in hell at the end of that. And the character deserves more. And I think that these plans that various creators have had to do something with this character and make her part of a group that also includes CIR-EL, I think speaks to the viability. But if nothing else, you know, she bore the mantle and carried this for a good number of years. And I think she deserves better than the continuity limbo to which she has been relegated. And I would love to see the character brought back because I think there's a lot of viability there.
Yeah, I completely agree. For a long time, I was really upset that they wouldn't even talk about her in the books. Aside from extremely brief references, like the fact that 2 years later we get CIR-EL and no one's like, wait, but didn't we just have a blonde Supergirl character? Like what, the fact that people just sort of rolled with it and just embrace the status quo of being back to the cousin again, always stung because it was a character that meant a lot and was there for a lot of really big moments and yeah, a lot of what people remember about her is getting punched by Doomsday into a goop and then having a convoluted angel story and that's it, like but she like you said bared the mantle really well for a good long time.
Look, the last thing I'll say, and then I'll have you plug your podcast, is that I know over the years, even during this event, I've held up the Earthborn Angel leg of Supergirl's journey as sort of this representation of how different and weird and convoluted it could get. And it is those things. But it's also not a negative. And I know I've been issuing this in all of our Peter David discussions, but yeah, I mean, for anyone who's curious, I definitely recommend diving in and checking out the series and don't let its weirdness be a deterrent. And there are some really wonderful stories here, and you get a true journey and an arc for this character that you, in a way that you don't always get to see. So I think it's a really rewarding reading experience, and I'm glad that we spent the time talking about it. What would you like to share with folks about your podcast?
Yeah, so I am also a Superman podcaster. I have my own show, which is Men of Steel, which I host with J. Mike Folson. It is a Superman and Superman adjacent show. So while we're primarily focused on Superman stuff. We do talk about things that are in the same ballpark. We've talked about Invincible. We've talked about all various things. So check that out. It is available at certainpov.com or wherever you get your podcasts. I host a couple of other shows. The big one I want to plug, which we've referenced before, is Trade School. It is a great project that I have been running where we bring on people to just talk about trade paperbacks that they love. And so, Anthony, you've done one, and we'll do another one soon. But the idea is just guest comes on and vamps for 5 to 15 minutes about a trade paperback that they really care about. And I'm putting out the call everywhere I can because I want to hear people's stories. I want to know why these books meant something to you. And it can be about the book itself, or it could be about the point in your life when you read that book. Comic books mean a lot to me, and I really appreciate knowing why comics mean a lot to other people. It's available at certainpov.com, wherever you get your podcasts, or at my YouTube channel, Certain POV Media. So check that out. If that interests you, reach out to me. You can reach out to me on most social media platforms at Case Aiken, except for Instagram, where I'm holding on for dear life to my AIM screen name from high school, which is Quetzalcoatl 5, because I was incredibly pretentious in high school. Or you can shoot me an email, case.aiken@gmail.com. I'd happily take submissions. Just if there's a comic book you feel passionate about, let me know. I'd love to hear your story.
You hear that, audience? Because periodically I will have people reach out and sort of offer to be guests on the podcast. And unfortunately, I can't accommodate everyone, but here's another outlet to make your voice heard. So I hope people will take you up on that. If nothing else, I hope that they will listen. It's a really fun project. I've been happy to be part of it. I'll make my selection for my next one and get on it. But Case, thank you so much. Audience, thank you for joining us. I always appreciate you tuning in. Make sure you come back as a Supergirl fan journey continues. And next time, at last, we've made it to Superman, Batman, Supergirl, and the reintroduction officially of CIR-EL. You don't want to miss it. Until then, as always, it's about what you do. It's about action. Support the show and receive exclusive content by becoming a member at patreon.com/Anthony Desiato. Rewards include our DCU spinoff podcast, advanced listens, sponsorship opportunities, and more. My sincere thanks to all patrons. Please rate and review the podcast via your platform of choice, subscribe so that you never miss an episode, and continue the conversation by joining us on social media. By popular demand, Digging for Kryptonite merch is available at our TeePublic store. Visit the link in the show notes to get your DFK shirts, hats, mugs, and more. Flat Squirrel Podcast is also home to Lighting the Bat Signal, a Batman fan journey, which applies the signature Digging for Kryptonite approach to the Dark Knight, as well as another exciting episode in the Adventures of Superman, now in its final year covering the classic George Reeves series. Subscribe today. Digging for Kryptonite is a Flat Squirrel production. Key art by Isaiah Simmons, and theme music by Dan Pritchard.